Number 10. A car crash. Let's start with the drama here. Pretty sure if you say you're an astronaut, people are going to look at you differently. In a good way. Man, you've been to space. After all, you are a human being who has seen just how small the world is compared to the wide universe. Many revere James Donald Halsell Jr. after the 5 space shuttle missions he took before retiring in 2006. But he must have hit the ground hard when he came down to Earth. Halsell was traveling in his car to West Monroe, Louisiana and stopped at a Motel 6. While there, he downed 3 glasses of wine before heading back on the road, which is a no-no. Therefore, tragedy struck. James crashed into a car, killing 2 of the young passengers in the vehicle who flew from the car when they crashed. He was going extremely fast and reportedly tried to steal a bystander's car when he stopped at the site. James told police that he didn't remember leaving the hotel or how the crash occurred. Though they found no drugs at the scene, police did find 10 empty sleeping pill packages back at the room. NASA declined to comment about the arrest. Very sad. Number 9. A love triangle. This one? Oh my god. This next one is pretty rough. We all know what it's like to go through a breakup. It's not fun. It sucks. It doesn't necessarily bring out the best in you. Mother of 3 and mission flight engineer as well as crew member on the 13-day shuttle mission, Lisa Nowak was a prominent figure in NASA's astronaut team. She was even the inspiration for Natalie Portman in the film Lucy in the Sky before she went all breakup song on her ex. In February 2007, Lisa drove from Houston to Orlando, Florida, wearing diapers, so she didn't have to stop, to confront the woman who she claims stole her man. She claimed she was going to have a calm conversation, but instead she ended up attacking her. She was in a wig and a trench coat and there was pepper spray. It was a whole ordeal. William O'Fallon and Nowak trained together and began an affair in 2004. Both divorced their partners, with Nowak thinking her future was with William. Wrong. William started exclusively dating Air Force Captain Colleen Shipman, and he thought Nowak took it well when he told her. Instead, she ended up sneaking into his apartment, read their email exchanges, and well, flash forward to a 900-mile drive, pepper spray, and nightmares Shipman will have for the rest of her life. Initially arrested on the attempted murder charges, they were dropped to less aggressive accusations like attempted burglary and kidnapping. Shipman and Bill are now married, while Nowak, after years of counseling, is doing much better, though she refuses to talk about the event for obvious reasons. I hope you're doing better. Number 8. Married to his work. NASA ended up wanting so little to do with this guy that they actually fired him. Today, divorce is about as common as breakups in high school. Though some happy news, it looks like the percentage is going down, but in the 60s, getting divorced was a major taboo. NASA's astronauts were about the closest thing to comic book heroes the world had ever seen, and they knew that public opinion was a huge part of their funding. So, when an astronaut hero misbehaved, NASA wasn't going to stand for it. Don Easel wasn't exactly a faithful husband, and he rarely visited his son, who was dying of leukemia. He also cheated on his wife multiple times at Cape Canaveral, which was flooded with eager groupies. He gaslighted his wife several times when she asked him to admit it, and when she suggested going to therapy if he thought she was crazy, he replied, "But I'll lose my job." Don and Harriet at last divorced, and NASA soon followed, firing Don as well. Bye, Don. See you later. Number 7. The Astronauts' Wives Club. Not a fun time. Speaking of astronauts behaving badly, let's talk about the reports of the Astronauts' Wives Club. These lovely ladies were used to a measly military pay when suddenly they became celebrities overnight, and given the aforementioned squeaky clean image NASA wanted to protect, any scandal was swept under the rug. According to the Astronauts' Wives Club, a true story by Lily Copel. On the outside, they were the ideal Stepford wives, apple pie baking, apron wearing beauties. But out of the 30 astronaut marriages from 1961 to 69, only 7 would stay married. The biggest wedge in the marriage was the time the men spent at Florida's Cape Canaveral, which I previously mentioned, which became off-limits playground. Cape Cookies became the name of the women who would magically appear to have their own rockets launched by the men who would touch the stars. To handle the silence and stress, the wives turned to excessive ways to self-medicate, the nightly gin and tonic with a tranquilizer garnish. Yeah. Pretty rough. Number 6. Fireflies. Ice particles, they said. Part of the capsule heat shield, they said. Could it have been that John Glenn saw something else instead? Glenn was the first American astronaut to orbit the planet in 1962. He was also one of the good ones. He and his wife Annie were married for 73 years. In fact, when he left to fight in World War II, he told her, and I quote, "I'm just going down to the corner store to get a pack of gum," to which she replied, "Don't be long." He said that every time he went away to war. She kept a gum gum wrapper in her purse every time after that. Anyways, grab a tissue, that's super cute, let's continue. Glenn, while flying over Australia, saw strange floating mass like tiny little stars outside the Friendship 7 capsule. When he tapped on the window, they flew off. Mission Control were at first concerned the anomalies were fragments of the heat shield, but that wasn't the case. No, it was something else. NASA has since explained the sighting as ice particles, but up until his death in 2016, Glenn never really believed it. His wife Annie finally joined him at peace, passing away due to COVID complications at the age of 100 in May 2020. Number 5. Space music. According to the Guinness Book of World Records, the first song played in space was Jingle Bells on the 16th of December 1965. It was broadcasted during NASA's Gemini GA spaceflight. Though there have been several musicians played out there in the big space ever since, there remains an artist unknown. Eugene Cernan in the Apollo 10 space capsule reported hearing a strange kind of music during a mission. What he described as a strange musical whistling sound, like how you would imagine space music to be, like the I can't do it. Just imagine very sci-fi. He reached out to NASA Mission Control to see if they'd heard it too. According to the mission transcripts released in 2008, the sounds were recorded. Of course, alien theories have spread far and wide, but NASA made no comment. Then, in the Apollo 11, Michael Collins recorded hearing the same sound while orbiting the moon. This time, NASA was prepared. They said it was, and I quote, interference between the LMs and command modules VHS radios, unquote. Sure it was, NASA. Sure it was. Number 4. Bright lights and beyond. It might surprise you to learn that not only do we have a ton of garbage down here on Earth, but a ton of space junk sits just above us. In fact, the estimate for just how much is staggering. Around 128 million pieces, about 6,000 tons of space debris in space. Earth's low orbit carries millions of rocket and spacecraft fragments along with dead satellites. Each one is flying around 18,000 miles per hour, so faster than a bullet? Yeah. So the likelihood of astronauts encountering space debris is pretty high, but this one example is pretty staggering. But that doesn't stop this case from being very strange. Brent Jett was in the STS-150 mission in 2006 on his way to help construct the ISS. But then he noticed, and I quote, some kind of reflective structure, unquote, outside the shuttle. According to him, quote, it doesn't look like anything I've ever seen outside of this shuttle, that's for sure, unquote. NASA took control of the camera and there were 3 bright objects in the sky. When they ordered an inspection of the craft, they saw nothing. Not even a hint. Space junk or aliens? NASA has no explanation and they won't talk about it, so what is it? And heading on to our top 3, number 3, the Gordo UFO. I suppose it's not too hard to guess that Major Gordo Cooper was a lover of all things space, but it turns out that his adoration goes deeper than that. In 1957, 30-year-old Cooper was test pilot and project manager of the fighter section of the Experimental Flight Test Engineering Division at Edwards AFB in California. 2 members of his crew one morning mentioned to him that they caught sight of a strange saucer-like object. It apparently didn't make a sound as it landed and took off. The 2 men took photos of the craft and Cooper was ordered to have the film developed, have no prints made, and send it right away to the Pentagon. He was also instructed not to look, but like of course he did. He saw exactly what the 2 men described and to his very deathbed insisted the government was covering it up. But not only that, on his 1963 solo trip, he had a close encounter that was broadcasted on NBC. He saw a glowing green object approaching and it was picked up on radar. But when he got to Earth, he wasn't allowed to talk about it. Number 2. Edits in space. Could NASA be editing the footage sent down from the International Space Station? This theory is hot among conspiracists. The idea really started to gain traction in July 2016. 2 different cameras 25 hours apart spotted a distinct square shape, larger than the Earth. Initially, UFO hunters concluded that it had to be some kind of unidentified object in our orbit, but another theory surfaced, that the shapes were actually attempts by NASA to edit something else out. Could it be meteors or a cover-up of something NASA has determined we are not ready to see yet? NASA was forced to deny that they didn't attempt a cover-up, but UFO hunters will never rest until the truth is revealed, even if it has been already, so we don't really know what's true. And last but not least, the Reich and NASA. Well, this is a surprising little tidbit, but honestly, I'm not too surprised. This is definitely worthy of being number 1, especially since NASA doesn't advertise it really at all. During World War II, the US recruited the help of over 1,600 German yacht Yahtzee scientists. Yes, I said Yahtzee because apparently YouTube gets scared, they are Death Eaters. Anyways, they hired over 1,600 German Yahtzee scientists in institutes like NASA to increase their payroll. The code name for this operation was Operation Paperclip because of all the paperclips on the immigration files, which brought in Werner von Braun and his V-2 rocket team. The former SS officer would become a US citizen and was a key architect in the Apollo program. What? In 1977, he was awarded the National Medal of Science despite having previously hand-picked slave laborers in Buchenwald for his rocket building efforts. Yeah, so that's special. Starting off number 10, no life insurance? This first one is definitely out of this world. Neil Armstrong didn't have life insurance along with the entire Apollo 11 team. That sounds absolutely bonkers, especially considering the fact that he was leaving behind family on Earth, so if something were to happen, which was very likely, there was nothing left for them. And also like, what? But it was because they were doing something that was more dangerous than anything any human had ever done before that they just couldn't afford the life policy. Taking out a life insurance policy was nearly impossible, but the astronauts had something up their sleeve. While in quarantine, the crew signed hundreds of autographs and gave them to their family and friends. Even though eBay wasn't a thing yet, they knew that those autographs would be worth a pretty penny considering how famous the team was. Thankfully, they didn't really need to, but that didn't stop the autographs from being sold. One even got picked up at an auction recently for 30 grand. Number 9, Gordon Cooper. Gordon Cooper. I think the phrase never meet your heroes really applies here, because as we learned in the first part, a lot of early astronauts really let the fame get to their heads. Cooper was happy in his married life, so long as he maintained the happiness of his mistress, who was also a married woman. 4 months before he was chosen to be an astronaut, his wife, Trudy, had decided that enough was enough. She was tired of his infidelity and decided it was time to leave after 12 years of marriage and put it in the dust. But little did she know, as she walked away, she was taking away his life dream. As we learned in the first list, divorce wasn't a good look. Cooper begged her to come back, not because he regretted his ways, but more so because his dreams of going to space would be cancelled. So it's like, come back, I don't miss you though. Whether it was to help him or because she got 70 grand from a Life magazine segment, Trudy went back. They stayed married until he retired in 1970, when it no longer mattered if he was married, so hopefully Trudy got out of there, you know what I mean? Number 8, hidden treasure. Speaking of Mr. Cooper though, he did make some interesting discoveries up there in the sky that he kept pretty close to his chest. Cooper was apparently very talented at spotting sunken ships in the ocean from up in space. Gordon flew on the Faith 7 flight in 1963 and spotted several anomalies that had the potential of being, I don't know, gold-soaked shipwrecks? When he got home, he put them all on a map, which was a decade-long project. He hunted down and coordinated which ships they could be, but didn't tell anyone until decades later. The discoveries came out in 2017 when a treasure hunter, Daryl Miklos, used the maps Cooper made to make a TV show. There were 100 sites Cooper speculated were shipwrecks, and the first 5 were correct, and he just kept turning up right. Good for you, Cooper. Good for you. Number 7, what's the buzz? Speaking of buzz, remember to head over to Bumblebee if you want to see more of me doing this, because this is what we do over there too, but quirkier. Anyways, enough of that. The Buzz we are talking about is Buzz Aldrin. Now Buzz did some pretty incredible things, but the side of Aldrin NASA doesn't love talking about is, well, yes, the married life. Apparently Buzz wasn't really an emotional guy, so to help his wife cope, he gave her a pet monkey in 1966. They had one before who had recently died, but this one was like nothing like the docile thing they had before. It hated his wife. It would make fun of his wife, bare its teeth, use profane finger language. It was very strange. Eventually, his wife got so upset that she said to her husband, "It's either the monkey or me, someone's leaving," to which Buzz replied dryly, "What are you waiting for?" Ouch. She stayed and put up with the monkey and the primate until 1974. After Buzz came back from space, he took up drinking and had many affairs, so they eventually divorced. Number 6, toilet trouble. Toilet humor can be a little taboo of a comedy topic sometimes, despite the fact that farts will always be funny. But you know a stand-up comedian is like digging for comedy and like just trying to get a laugh if they're using toilet humor, you know what I mean? Anyone agree with that? But I'm not surprised they don't talk about it that often. I mean, it's not pleasant to imagine anyone doing the number 2, but it's even more so whilst in space, because how does that work? In space, gravity likes to be a little finicky because there isn't any. From taping bags to astronauts' butts to vacuums, right? Helping an astronaut do their duty proved more difficult than they imagined. They made pants astronauts could wear which could hold up to 3.75 cups of urine, and even a 50-grand toilet you had to be strapped into. NASA's Scott Weinstein had to teach the crew to use it and said that it was all about alignment. The hole was a quarter the size of the one that we have in our toilets, and some of them had to use an under-the-seat camera so they could like get perfect aim every single time. Today it's less complicated. They sit on a tiny hole and a vacuum sucks the stuff away. Who would have thought a basic human action would be so hard in space? Number 5. Money, money, money? Take a guess. Right now, watching this video, how much do you think an astronaut gets paid to venture where no human has gone before? Yeah, like take a minute, I'll wait. Long enough. My first guess was like at least like 700 grand or like millions, because you're literally risking your life where no one can save you. Even though most astronauts don't actually end up going to space, but at least the ones that do, right? But the actual number may surprise you. Astronauts are paid via the federal government's general schedule pay scale, and they usually qualify for GS13/14, the highest being 15. This means that they can make anywhere between 100 grand to 161 grand. Hey, to someone like me that's got like 2 to 3 jobs minimum to pay rent, that sounds pretty good. But somehow that doesn't seem quite enough for what they do, or does it? Anyways, by comparison, fish and wildlife administrators are reportedly paid the same. So, I don't know. How do we feel? I guess the main perk is being able to say you made it to space unless you're doing most of the work on the ground. Thoughts? Number 4, the Challenger. The Challenger was one of the most devastating moments in aerospace history. It was literally the worst case scenario that astronauts probably have nightmares about. On January 28th, the world watched in horror as 73 seconds into the launch of the Challenger, it exploded in mid-air, taking with them 7 astronauts, including Christy McAuliffe, the first civilian in space. The reason for the explosion was because of the 2 rubber O-rings, which were designed to seal the sections of the rocket booster, failed. On the morning of the launch, temperatures were unusually low, which put the craft at risk. Engineers warned against launching. Due to media hype and the pressure, they pressed forward, which was the deadliest mistake they could make. NASA tried to ease the public by saying the crew was probably unconscious when it happened, but more research revealed that they were awake and aware. So, needless to say, not something astronauts love talking about. Number 3, Thad Roberts. This next one isn't entirely PG, so like there's a warning for you. But Thad Roberts decided one day that the Mile High Club just wasn't cool enough for him. Thad Roberts always wanted to be the first man on Mars, but he ruined his chances of that for life. I don't know why. Thad stole $20 million worth of lunar rock so he could touch the stars. He, along with accomplices Tiffany Fowler and Shay Soar, used their official IDs to break in and steal the safe the rocks were in. They took it to a motel, broke it open with a chainsaw, and then scattered them on the bed. Tiffany and Thad then joined the 384,000 kilometer club before trying to sell them to an interested buyer. However, their lovemaking contaminated the rock samples, which made them useless to the scientific community. They were eventually caught by the FBI, and Roberts was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Also, he could say he had sex that was out of this world. Next up, number 2, questionable water. This next one isn't technically a secret, but it's definitely something that's a little embarrassing to talk about. We've talked about some crazy survival stories on Bumblebee channel, and one of them included drinking urine to survive. Something a lot of survivalists don't recommend unless absolutely desperate. Essentially, if you consume your own urine, you are consuming the toxin your body tried to get rid of. But NASA has found a pretty neat way to make it fashion. Astronauts in space actually drink their own urine, but that's after the ship has transformed it back into water. They've been drinking their recycled urine since 2009 aboard the ISS, so I guess anytime they are thirsty, they just go to the washroom. The toilet they use, as mentioned above, uses powerful acids to help control fungal and biological growth. They don't recommend doing this without this technology, obviously, just in case that idea popped into your head. Currently though, they are looking at tech that might be able to pull water from the air, but they are still far from that. And last but not least, the Apollo 11 hoax. The moon landing hoax is still alive and well, and true or untrue, astronauts aren't likely to be heard talking about it because it lives in the realm of conspiracy. We have probably talked about it on this channel. If you can find one video about it, post it below. On July 20th, 1969, the first astronauts landed on the moon. It was a race between the US and the Soviet Union to put their flag on some moon cheese, and we beat them. They beat them. I'm Canadian. Right? Forgot. But ever since conspiracy after conspiracy has sprung, 5% of Americans reportedly still believe that the moon landing was faked. About 16 million people. You would think that NASA would just like put this conspiracy to bed, but the video that showed the landing apparently disappeared. So that's convenient.
Starting off this countdown, we have the animal corpses. Over the years, a number of animals have been sent into space before humans were ever. This was done to study the effects that space would have on a living being. But sadly, a number of these animals and the crafts have never been recovered, and to this day are still floating around in space. Apparently, when astronauts are up there, they have seen some of the deceased animals floating in space. Not only is that super depressing, but also makes everything super eerie as well. Like imagine you're up there and all of a sudden you're like, oh look at the cute dog, never mind. You know what I'm saying? No thanks. Coming in at number 9, we have the close calls. We all know that being an astronaut is extremely dangerous, but I still don't think we all understand just how dangerous their job really is. At any time while they're up in space, they could just get hit with space junk and die just like that. When Chris Hadfield was in space, they were almost hit by a shooting star. He said, and I quote, "If you want to just talk raw fear, to watch a shooting star from the other side of the sky is a humbling thing to see, because it's no longer just a pretty sparkler like a free firework in the sky. Instead, it's this big thing that could destroy your spacecraft at any time and easily kill you." I swear, I would never be able to sleep while up there. I'd be too paranoid the entire time. Moving on at number 8, we have the readjustment. Apparently, astronauts have a really difficult time readjusting when they get back to Earth. Not only are they back to a place where there's gravity, but being in space in the first place really impacts the body. First off, getting used to the gravity apparently makes astronauts feel really sick, and for months they just feel woozy and feel like they're gonna throw up constantly while back on Earth. And also, when you return, it throws off your balance, so it's kind of like learning to walk all over again. Not only that, but it's emotionally draining as well. You have to get used to the noise of crowds and the constant stimulation from everything going on around you. This often overwhelms the astronauts when they return home. And lastly, apparently astronauts can get taller in space. And I mean, if you're on the shorter side, then this is probably a dream for you. But no, apparently it's super painful. You grow in space and then you come back down to Earth and you shrink in size, and it can cause extreme back and leg pain for years. And at number 7, we have the radiation levels. While in space, astronauts are exposed to approximately 50 to 2,000 millisieverts during a 6-month period. Being exposed to 100 millisieverts puts you at a huge risk for developing cancer. Not only that, but they are at a risk for gene mutation, which can affect their future children. I'm telling you, astronauts literally sacrifice their entire lives just to go to space. It is crazy. In our 6th spot today, we have the trained PA. Okay, I certainly never knew about this, and it's quite wild to think about. But when astronauts are in space, they can't tell when their bladders are full. That's because the urine is floating around in the bladder instead of being at the bottom of the bladder. So astronauts aren't able to tell when they have to go pee. They can only ever tell when the bladder is almost full, which obviously can cause bladder and kidney problems. So what astronauts have to do is undergo special bathroom training. They are actually trained to relieve themselves every 2 hours. That's insane when you really think about it. Like, the training they go through is intense. They really have thought about everything. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the germs. This is another thing that we don't really think about when we think of astronauts. But basically, being in a spaceship is a really germy environment. Think about it. When a person sneezes on Earth, the snot particles shoot about 3 to 6 feet, and then gravity just knocks it down, you know? But in space, there's no gravity. So if an astronaut sneezes or coughs, their particles are lingering in the air for their companions to breathe in and enjoy. First off, gross. Second, this allows sickness to spread very, very quickly on board, which is a huge hazard. And at number 4 today, we have the flesh falling off. Yes, it's as horrific as it sounds. Basically, after a month in space, an astronaut will lose chunks of flesh off of their feet. All the calluses on the bottom of their feet will fall off. On the plus side, their feet will be as smooth as a newborn baby. The negative side, the chunks of flesh will float freely throughout the cabin. In fact, when astronauts take off their clothes, they have to make sure that they do it near a vent so that it can suck in all the dead skin cells. Or else, you'll be minding your own business and then all of a sudden, a chunk of somebody else's foot is just gonna be like floating by your face. Not pleasant if you ask me. Moving on to number 3, we have the smell of space. Apparently, space has a really nasty smell. So if you got a sensitive nose like me, maybe rethink your career choice. People have described the smell as hot metal or welding fumes. Others say it smells sulfurous. The worst description is that it smells like sweaty feet and stale body odor mixed with nail polish and gasoline. No thanks. And it's not like a faint smell. No, it's as if you just stuck your nose right into that bag of mixed unpleasant odors. That smells very unpleasant. Imagine smelling that for hours. That alone would make you feel nauseous. In our second spot today, we have the weakening bones. When in space, astronauts actually have to exercise twice as much. That alone is torture. But if they don't, they run the risk of weakening their muscles and bones. Because on Earth, we are constantly working our muscles by pushing back on gravity. In space, that doesn't apply. A study of 13 International Space Station astronauts found that their bone strength dropped 14%. That's about the same bone strength as an elderly woman with osteoporosis. And that happened within about 6 months in space. That's terrifying. They literally are putting their bodies through hell. And some astronauts, when they return to Earth, have to deal with skinny leg syndrome, which is basically their legs look super skinny because in space there was no gravity to help the blood move down to their legs. They have to suffer with this for months until it returns back to semi-normal. And in our number 1 spot, we have the aliens. Because I can't talk about space without talking about aliens. Now, it may just be that when Neil Armstrong took his walk on the moon, he became the first person to do so, and also the first person to see aliens. So according to NASA, when Armstrong landed on the moon, they lost transmission with Neil for roughly 2 minutes. During those 2 minutes, Armstrong apparently sent this back to NASA, and I quote, "These babies were huge, sir, enormous. Oh God, you wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you, there are spacecrafts out there, lined up on the far side of the crater's edge. They're on the moon, watching us." That last part, they're on the moon, watching us? That's terrifying. So apparently NASA never received the signal, but it got sent to other radio hams. On top of that, Maurice Chatelain, former chief of NASA communications, confirmed that Armstrong did indeed report seeing 2 UFOs. But of course, if you bring this up to NASA, they will deny all claims, and they apparently lost all original recordings, which sounds hella suspicious. Like, how do you just misplace these recordings? Okay, NASA, okay.